This man, the father of 3, is emptying the family lavatory. Goodwin Richard is an agricultural worker on a farm in Cornwall. He's paid £14 8 shillings a week, earns no overtime because of mechanisation. His cottage comes with the job but has no running water or sanitation, only a shed at the bottom of the garden with a bucket and chemicals and a tap on an outside wall. He and his wife have lived in their cottage for 4 years. There's no drainage, no heating system. Any hot water they want has to be heated separately in a boiler.
Come on, mind your legs. Quickly. Not too hot, is it? All right.
For the children, a bath is a rare luxury. For their mother, who is recovering from pleurisy, perhaps caused by these conditions, it's back-breaking work. Just one of the difficulties of living under conditions that have hardly changed since medieval times.
Well, we've got to carry every little drop of water in and every little drop of water out. And soon, when the children finish bathing, we've got to carry the water across the road and throw it away across the road.
Do you find there any sort of big problems with the children not having indoor toilets?
Oh, terrible. I've had a terrible time in training them, you know, potty training more or less. They're scared. I can't get her to go to the toilet. She still uses pot at the age of 3, which is ridiculous. But I just got to put up with it.
What about the condition of the cottage itself? What sort of condition is it in?
Well, it's very wet indeed. And we've asked if we could have the walls and that redone, but they won't do nothing about it. If we don't like it, I presume we can get out, and that's what we've got told.
Most people who live in cities and who work in industry wouldn't accept conditions like this, where you have a house which is damp and you have no sanitation, you have no water. Why do you think farm workers put up with it?
Because I think they're afraid of their boss. That's what I said to me. I told Mr. Folks, I really think that the farm workers are really afraid of their boss.
Why are they afraid of their boss?
Because, for instance, if you go into a boss, you say, oh, I'd like to have so-and-so done. Well, the boss say, oh, I can't do it, we can't afford to do it or something. But if he won't do it, and you keep going on to him, right, well, if you're not satisfied with what you got, well, you must go.
Do you think of yourself as being poor?
Well, yes, I do. Really, I do really think so, because we can't, have a good meal in the week. Sundays is the only time we have a good meal, good cooked meal, you know, a roast meat or a chicken or something like that. Like I said, during the week we might have a bit of bacon fried up, or sausages done in casseroles or something like that. We don't have a good substantial meal not during the week.
What about clothes, having 3 young children?
Well, I had to go jumble set or else make them myself. I had to have, like if a sweater gone too small for my husband or for himself, I rip it out and knit woolly dresses or cardigans or things like that. And for their underclothing, I'd use all underskirts and that, like so myself, make panties and that for them. That way.
How often do you and your husband manage to get out together?
Once a year. That's New Year's Eve.
Where do you go?
Oh, a train.
Where's that? How far away?
About half a mile away.
It's the only time you go out?
That's the only time we go out together. We never go out together any other time.
When did you last go to the pictures with him?
When I last went to the pictures with him was 6 years ago. And that's when we was going together.
Do you ever manage to get out and have a drink at all or anything?
No. No, if we wanted to drink for Christmas, I had to put in Christmas clubs, you know, where travellers come around and you put in so much a week in a club and save up and buy a few drinks around Christmas time. You might manage then to get a few bottles in, that's just about all.
When did you last have a holiday?
Never in my life have I ever had a holiday. Never.
1 in 4 of all farm workers is paid less than £13 a week. Stanley Dowrick is paid the minimum wage of £12 8. In the old days, a farm worker's job may well have been unskilled labour, but here Stanley is the only full-time worker on a 240-acre farm. These days, the job of food producing is always responsible, often skilled.
Well, today is more mechanised. You've got more things to handle and more things to think about when you're doing it. That you're continually occupied in your work. But you haven't got much time to think about anything else, have you? To a certain extent.
Do you think that to some extent you're still getting paid as if you were leading a horse and a cart round a field?
I think you're paid to what normal people consider a suitable wage.
Do you think it's suitable?
Well, no, it isn't suitable, but it's one of these things, I'm afraid.
Why is it, do you think, before we go off, why is it, do you think, that your union hasn't been more effective in getting better pay and better conditions for farm workers?
Well, we aren't 100% in the union. We're just individual workers scattered all over a wide area, and you've got a job to contact each other.
No more reading now, Marie. It's time to sleep. Night night. Sleep well, my love. Night night. Good night.
The Dowricks live in a tied cottage. Instead of paying rent, the worker must do compulsory overtime every other weekend. They've lived here for 16 years, now have 7 children. The Child Poverty Action Group has calculated that an alarming number of farm workers with more than 3 children live below the poverty line. In addition, the common belief in a dairy-rich life of free food perks is largely a myth, and for a farm worker's wife, caring for a family means a 16-hour day.
You don't mind working, but you have the anguish of having to say no to your children so often, you know, or not being able to fulfill their little wishes. You always got to be so strict. You got to say, well, you can't have this, or you must see that you get it when you earn money yourself. Well, these days everything is a bit different and freer. Children have a lot. For instance, we don't have television for them because there's this license, you know, to pay, and the television itself is expensive. On a rental, I wouldn't think of it either.
But what other sort of things can't you give them that they ask for?
For instance, if they want a new bike, you straight away got to say, well, no, you can't have this. We got to live as well as having things, you know. And if I didn't have sometimes send things to me from friends or relations in the way of clothing, our living standard would be not the same as it is, you know. The home wouldn't be so comfortable for the children as the amenities to keep them clean and have their own bed each, which I think is necessary. I mean, some families think nothing of it to let 3 or 4 sleep in one bed. My husband had this. You were, what, 4 boys in one bed when you came on, because there was not the money to put around, you know.
Do you find that you personally have to be careful about things? Do you smoke, for instance?
No.
Do you ever stop off on the way home and have a pint?
No, can't afford that.
When did you and your wife last go out anywhere?
I think that was 7 or 8 years ago when we went to the pictures.
We've been to the pictures about twice.
3 times.
Since
we've
three
been married.
times.
That's in how many years?
16 years we're
16
married.
years.
What's been the most difficult part?
Well, the hardest thing is, for instance, when your husband says, I can't take my holiday this year, I better have the money. And you can see how he looks worked up, you know, he's not a very fat person and he's got hard to work, and you think, well, he deserves the rest, he could do with the rest, but he can't take it, you know.
That generally happens, you know, around November, see? You leave your holidays go so long, and then the kiddies want something for Christmas. Oh, well, I'll give up my holiday to buy something extra for the children for Christmas.
There's another angle at this too. I mean, the holiday, it never suits the farmer at the time that you would like to take a holiday. It's just a busy time, you know. There's either the tilling or else the harvesting.
I think many people would say that the farm worker, in fact, is exploited.
Oh, he is, yeah, he's exploited every time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why do you allow yourself to be exploited? And why do farm workers get exploited?
Oh, I wouldn't like to say why they do get exploited. I mean, you start in these jobs. It's a dead-end job when you started in the beginning, but you don't realize that until you grow up. And it's too late when you grow up and realize what it is.
Would you let your children go onto the land?
No.
My husband always says that none of them should.
I don't want any of them to go on the land. I think that with today's education, there's no need for any child to go on the land, because they can see for themselves before they start now that there's no future in it.
Cottages like these could be dream homes, But these are tied cottages which go free or rent reduced with the job. Before you can think of changing your job, consider losing your home too, even though it isn't always the bargain it may appear to be. Conditions on the land have become so bad that 35,000 farm workers a year are leaving for the cities. They don't always leave voluntarily. Half this country's farm workers live in tied cottages. They can be evicted at their employer's whim. This is an eviction. Jim George was a forestry worker living in a tied cottage on an estate in South Devon. His back was damaged when a tree rolled on top of him. Now he can no longer work, so he's being evicted. He, his wife and 3 children lose their home, yet they're luckier than some. He's found another job, part-time caretaker, and at least they have somewhere else to live in Exeter. They're going to become townspeople instead of countrymen. Farm workers can become victims of one of the last vestiges of feudalism in England, lose their jobs and they lose their homes. There are occasions when farm workers are simply turned out, their belongings left in a pile on the road, without prospect or hope of another job or home. At least Mr. and Mrs. George do have somewhere to go, but still they had no choice in the matter.
That's the way it is.
How do you feel about that?
Well, of course, the union has an accident claim in, but what I feel about the tied cottage and the estate, I'm afraid you wouldn't print.
Why not?
Well, it's not so much the estate or the cottage. It's the system that causes it.
Yeah.
The system's wrong. I can't really explain it. You've got to live under it before you know what it's about. Well, this is a threat from the time you walk in. If the governor just doesn't know the colour of your eyes, he can sack you and you're out of your cottage as well.
Has it happened to you before?
No, it's the first time I've ever lived in a tied cottage. I lived in a caravan before I came here, and they more or less encouraged me to take the cottage because they wanted me to take the job here. I wanted a cottage because the children were growing up, but this is the last tied cottage I shall ever live in. Most of these evictions are from farms. Well, the Labour government gave the farmer security of tenure in 1947, and the same farmer can still throw workmen on the road. This, of course, is forestry, but it's all allied with agriculture. We're all in the same condition. Even forestry commission men are all in the same position. And a lot of them are becoming redundant now.
They gave us notice. There's an empty cottage here. There's an empty cottage across the way. There's empty cottages down in Beer, which they're selling now so nobody can rent them. And they pick on this hovel.
What would you say if any of your children wanted to go into farming, go and work on farms?
God, no, never. No, I'd rather see them go in the mines.
Bob Tucker may have a home and a job, but he doesn't earn even the minimum wage. It may seem like a neat trick. His farmer applies to a local wages committee for a permit to pay him less than the minimum because, he says, Tucker isn't fully competent, a sort of village idiot. It goes on legally. To complete the picture, the permit is granted to the farm worker himself. So now Bob Tucker is officially authorised to work for less than the union minimum. To make ends meet, Mrs. Tucker must deliver newspapers. Every morning and afternoon she has to go out on a round because a committee of farmers and farm workers has said her quiet, withdrawn husband isn't normal. If £12 8 shillings a week is a meagre minimum, what would you call 30 bob a week less? After a day in the fields, Bob helps with the newspaper round. He was classified as subnormal 12 years ago. The label's been there ever since.
Do you think if your husband had been a more aggressive sort of man, then perhaps he wouldn't be in the position he's in now?
Well, like I said just now, I think if he could stand up for himself and turn round and answer back a bit more, I think he'd stand a better chance. But they see that he's a quiet sort of a fellow and he won't turn round, and I suppose they're trying to make a mug of him, you see. Takes him for granted.
Bob Tucker's farmer who applied for the permit is Jack Sanford. The permit system was really designed to allow men who were physically or mentally handicapped to continue to work, even though at lower wages, rather than lose their jobs. A system that appears sometimes to be loosely interpreted.
If you've got a man that isn't really efficient, you apply to the Agricultural Committee and they come and investigate and see what he is fit to do.
Yeah.
If he isn't up to the mark, of course, they ask you what you're prepared to pay him. You say how much you will pay.
Yeah.
And of course, if a chap don't like that, he can always go somewhere else.
This is what happened with Mr. Tucker.
Yes, he was here with me for about 3 years, and I paid him full wages. I found he was breaking quite a few things. I found out that we couldn't afford to go on like that, so that's why I tried to get a permit for him.
How much less, in fact, do you pay Mr. Tucker than the union rate?
Well, I don't know whether we're supposed to say or not.
I think you can, yes.
I don't think we are, you know. I believe it's more of a private matter than anything else.
Well, can I ask you if you pay him, say, more than £10 a week?
Oh yes, he gets more than £10 a week. He gets £11 a week.
What would you do if the wages committee said that the permit wasn't going to exist anymore? Had to pay him full rate?
I'm afraid he wouldn't exist anymore here.
You wouldn't?
No.
So Bob Tucker supports his wife and 2 children on £11 a week, classed as handicapped by a wages committee. Colin Down of the National Union of Agricultural Workers isn't convinced that the system is entirely fair.
Medical experts can be called in. There is an allowance for that in fact they can be invited in, but I've not known of a case in Devon yet where in fact we've asked for medical experts to be called in or, to deal with the situation. It's normally a decision of the wages committee, of the subcommittee, who could be a farmer's representative, a union representative visiting the farm, and an independent.
But in fact they have no special medical knowledge to be able to say virtually that a man is mentally subnormal.
No, these people, the farmer nor the workers' representative, would have any special knowledge of that type of thing.
Do they come to see what you do?
No.
They never did?
No, never. And see nobody, come round when I'm to work. All they come to see is the boss in the yard.
But nobody has actually come and watched you plowing a field?
Nobody.
Do you think this is really very satisfactory?
This is not satisfactory in some cases where, the point is that, let's be quite frank about this, a farmer could take advantage of a situation, where a man is the shy type, quiet, and not prepared so much to speak up for himself. The farmer feels that he's perhaps a little slower than the previous man he had there, The previous man might have left for a better job, because he's capable of getting a pound above the basic minimum rate. But this man is just a basic minimum man, a man who is quiet. And the farmer takes advantage of this situation and thinks, well, he's not going to say anything if I call the committee in. And he, in fact, applies for a permit. And then in come the committee, and the man, being shy, of course, doesn't put on the best show before the committee. Let's be fair, everybody suffers from a certain amount of nerves, and if your abilities are being vetted by a committee, you naturally feel that this is, you feel that you're being pushed down a little further, this is the point.
So in fact the unscrupulous farmer can use the permit system to get cheap labour?
I think the unscrupulous farmer could. If, of course, we've got to take into account that the committee do visit, but they could take advantage. And I would say there are the odd occasions where they do take advantage.
How did you come to be concerned specifically with the Tucker case?
Well, I am concerned because the complaint was brought to me at that district committee meeting. I then visited Mr. Tucker, and I was quite satisfied that he was just a quiet type of chap.
Mm.
And that, in fact, in this case, he was capable of performing the minimum duties of any agricultural worker. and that he was in fact performing these duties, and that he should receive the basic minimum rate. This is how I felt at this stage. And I felt that if we allowed this sort of thing to go on, we do not know where it's going to stop. We must safeguard the minimum rate at least.
Are you saying, in fact, that Mr. Tucker ought not to be on a permit?
I am saying that he ought not to be on a permit. Knowing the duties that he's carried out, I am definitely saying that Mr. Tucker should not be on a permit.
So how do you go about getting him off it?
Well, the point is, getting him off it is out of the question now. There was a label put on him in 1957, and Mr. Tucker has now is stuck with that label.
Do you think you've been treated fairly, Mr. Tucker?
Well, I don't know what to say about that.
Well, you should say what you think.
No,
In what way then, Bob?
money situation.
Am I paid you all what you've earned then?
Yeah.
So, in what way then?
Oh,
Now, look, Bob. You've had Mr. Down to see you.
yeah.
Supposing Mr. Down says that you're fit to work without a permit, that you can earn your living without a permit, I mean, there's no reason why you should stay or work for me on a permit.
No, no.
Why have you stayed here 16 years? I mean, if you haven't been pleased with the way I've treated you.
What this housing problem, that.
Well, there you are. I mean, you got a modern house for 12 and sixpence a week.
Yeah.
If you went anywhere else to work and you had to get another house, it cost you £4 a week. I mean, don't you think I've considered you a little bit in keeping you on?
Well,
I mean, I haven't been bound to. I could have had other men work for me if I wanted to.
yeah, I know that.
Supposing I was to give you the sack and you were outside the door, out in the road, you wouldn't think that I'd done a very good job, do you, would you?
Well, you can't turn me out like that, can I?
Oh yes, if you get an eviction order.
Ah, there's so long.
Are you sure that you've been fair?
Yes, I'm quite sure of that. In my mind, I think I've been fair.
What do you think has been so unfair?
Well, I mean, say this permit business. How can you prove that that I'm that? Where they got the permit? He hasn't got no proof, has he?
What do you mean? But I haven't got any proof.
Oh, mental and that.
What proof did you have to give the committee?
Well, they came out and had an interview.
With you?
That's the only proof that I got.
An interview with you?
Yeah. Well, and he was there as well. We're all in together.
Did they see you work?
No.
Walter Morgan was one of the committee who examined Bob Tucker. As they aren't psychiatric experts, in these cases then, they presumably check a man's working capabilities.
No, of course, I haven't been it on occasions like that. I would like to, but I'm a worker like he is, and I'm only screwed down to the time that I'm at limit to go to these places. Very often we got to wait weeks before we can, on our part, I don't know what the rest of the committee do, but if I was a free man, perhaps we could go well enough 2 or 3 hours with a worker and to see what he could do and what he was doing.
But ought the wages committee subcommittees not in fact to do this? Ought they not to go there and
Well,
test a man and see what he can do?
Probably yes. We've never been talked about or even suggested, I don't think.
And isn't this
Yeah.
what the wages committee really ought to do?
Well, yes, probably they did. Perhaps it's a point that we've just let slip by, and it is a point that we ought to pick up perhaps in the future. I don't know what other counties do. Will they do the same as us? I wouldn't know.